ready to paint. One thing I wanted to remind you of, I always use a pipette to put my water in my paints to just kind of get them activated and ready to go. And then I use kind of just a cheaper brush, not that they're cheap, but it's just less expensive, to stir my paints up over in my actual paint palette. And then I bring them over here and we'll also stir them up in here, because you can ruin the tip of your nice watercolor brushes if you kind of keep bending the tip of it, which I've actually done before, which is super annoying. So if I can save you the grief, let me do that for you. And then again, I have my little scratch piece of paper, if you will, over here. And of course, paper towels off to the side and also in my hand. So the first thing we're going to start with is the orange, the inside of the orange. And for that, I am using Indian Yellow and Cadmium Red Light. For the Cadmium Red Light, I actually added like just the tiniest bit of blue. It makes it look a little bit more natural. And for the Indian Yellow, I actually added a little bit of the Cadmium Red Light into that as well. Since the inside of an orange isn't technically yellow, but I like this color, and then I just wanted to add a little bit of orange to kind of make it a little bit more rich, if you will. I have several brushes. To start with, I'm going to be using my Princeton 6 round. This is actually one of the ones I kind of messed up the tip, I think. But I love this brush, and I've actually been using the 6 quite a bit. My paints are creamy. So in order to achieve kind of what would make it look juicy, I will leave those areas open. I'm not going to just go down and paint the whole section. If you don't feel comfortable with that, there is a product called masking fluid. Like this is an example of a good one, and it also has like the little applicator, so it comes out skinny if you want to, or they make little brushes. They have some things like this, so they're rubber. You wouldn't use an actual brush unless it's an old brush, and you can put like soap on it, because you'll never get that off your brush if you do that. So having the little applicator, you can just wash it right off. But you would use it, and everywhere you put the masking fluid, the paint won't adhere to. And then after you paint it and it dries, you can rub off the masking tape, and then you have the white underneath. But I think I'm gonna go ahead and start with this brush. And again, I said my paints are pretty creamy, and I'm gonna start with that Indian Yellow with that little bit of Cadmium Red Light. And I like to start at the center. I'm kind of pulling my way up, but as I'm going, I'm gonna leave some gaps, maybe some bigger ones to start with, and then I can go in and fill those in. I do go all the way up against my line. And then if I get a little bit into the green part, that's okay, because that's a little bit of a darker color. So you can kind of just go right along that edge there. And then you can kind of start going back in and filling in some of those lines, but you want to make sure, or some of the clear spots. And then I'm gonna go in, I'm gonna rinse my brush a little bit, and then I'm gonna go in with just a little bit of that darker color. And I'm working on different paper than normal, so I'm actually going to get this wet a little bit so that it will kind of diffuse naturally, because you don't want it to just be one solid color like so. So I'm actually going to zoom in just for a second so you can see that a little bit better on the next one. I'm going to make this a little bit more water in it, just so that I can really get it to diffuse together. So this has a little bit more water in it, but I'm still just kind of working my way to fill in the entire segment, but I'm leaving some little pockets of white. And then I'm going to go in with a little bit of that darker color and just kind of drop that in. So I'm just kind of touching the tip of my brush to that color that's already down, just to add a little bit of a variety. And then I'm going to turn my paper and I'm going to work my way around. I will try to keep that where you can see it. A lot of times I work wet on wet. This time I'm working wet on dry. So it's a lot different than what I would normally do. Or not normally do, but what I usually do the most, it seems like. But it's fun to branch out. Again, if it's not diffusing as much as I want, I just kind of rinse my brush and have it just be kind of damp. And then I can go in and just lightly add a little bit of water so that it doesn't make any really harsh edges. So we're going to kind of work our way around while we let things kind of dry. So I didn't really do this, but you could really start with these segments first and work your way around. That way when we go to the rosemary, it's dry. It will dry fairly quickly because we're working wet on dry anyway. So I'm going to go ahead and start the rosemary. And for that, I am using, this is light green. It's so hard to see the colors in the camera. True green, and then this is hooker's green, and again I may add a little bit of red to those to knock them back a little bit as I go. For this one I'm going to start with the yellow green, and I'm going to put just a touch of red in that, I believe. And this is the one color that I'm going to have be more of like a wash, so I want it to be lighter when I begin, because a rosemary has different shades of green throughout it. And then I'm going to go ahead and stick with this size brush for now. It's the 6 Princeton. And I'm going to go through, and I like to start at the tip of the, actually it just varies. And then I'm just going to use one stroke, really. Yeah, you can start at either end. And then if there's little places where you get like a little extra water there, you can just kind of dry your brush off and then soak it up. I'm going to kind of go through, and with some of these I'm going to just go ahead and put just this color. And if you want to make it a little lighter after you put the paint down, you can rinse your brush, have it just be a little bit damp, and then you can kind of pick some of it off. I leave sometimes just a little bit of white as well. And then I'll go in with the next color, which I am going to add a little bit of red to. And when I say a little bit, like I just kind of barely dip my brush in the other color. Now I'll go in and fill some of those up with just that darker color. And I will put that darker color with some of those that I already made lighter, but I'm not going to put it, I'm not going to fill the whole thing in. And while those are still a little bit wet, you can drop in a little bit of that next green, which is the hooker's green. Again, I'm working on different paper than I normally do, although I do work on hot pressed. It's just not as much. So it'll dry a little bit differently than if you're working on the cold pressed. So I just kind of alternate the greens. Again, with turning my paper. I always have to turn it because I want the tip of my brush to be at a certain angle. And it's easier to achieve that if I'm able to turn my paper. Okay, I'm gonna leave that like that for now. And I've talked before about different weighted lines, and I think I might go back in when I'm done and put a little bit of a thicker line just in the rosemary. We'll see. They are a little different, the colors. Again, I hate lighting because it's kind of hard to see the two different ones. And again, if I don't like the harshness of something, I just have a very lightly damp brush and I can go in and just kind of soften those areas. And that happens, like I said, this is a little bit of a different paper. It can be either because your paint is too wet, I guess it has too much water in it, and it could dry weird, or just you've put such a thick amount of paint that on this paper it just kind of makes a harsh line. So I don't mind it too much, but some of those I'll soften up a little bit. All right, there we go. I'm getting a little fussy, so we're gonna move on. Now I'm gonna go ahead and go to the berries. And for that, I am using, this is Scarlet, and then Madder. It's kind of like just, it's kind of a purpley, has a little bit of a purpley hue. I'm gonna use that kind of as a shadow. I'm gonna start out with, for the berries, I do kind of like to get those wet first, and we're gonna work around. We'll do the front berry. Actually, we'll do this back berry first. And just a little bit of water. You can leave a little spot for a highlight if you want. I did not this time. I will definitely do it on the other two. So like this, I left white. I didn't have to put it back in. But I do like to use Posca pens and stuff for things like that. This is a little green just because I didn't rinse my brush out good enough. That's okay. It'll get covered up. And then I'm going to go into my creamier consistency of Scarlet. And then you want it to bloom like that. So if it's not blooming like that, then you don't have enough water on your paper. So you want more water on your paper, and then a thicker, creamier consistency of actual paint, so you're not introducing even more water to your paper. I'm going to wipe my brush off, and I'm going to go into this Madder red, and I'm actually going to add a little bit of both reds together. That way it's not so drastic between the two. And I'm going to go in and just kind of drop in a little of that darker color just in a few spots. And then I'm going to leave that to dry. So now I'm going to come down here to the bell, and I'm going to start with the bow. And I'm going to go ahead and just use the same colors as I already did. And this time we can go ahead and just paint the whole bow in this first color, because we'll go back in with the darker color to put the inside in after this dries. So it's okay just to go ahead and kind of color that whole thing in. And you always want to be moving your paint when you're coloring in an entire area in one direction. You don't want to go back and forth. It can dry weird. Now I'm going to go ahead and do this outer edge of the orange. And then for that, I'm going to switch to a smaller brush. This is a 3, so I have a little bit more control. And this is where I'm using the mixture of the cadmium red light with just a little bit of that ultramarine, just to knock it back so it's not just kind of like a bright orange. It's a creamy consistency. So I'm gonna go in, and on the outer edge, I'm gonna make it pretty. I'm just gonna make it straight and follow along the line that I drew in. But on that inner edge, I'm gonna kind of make it squiggly, and I'm okay if it goes outside my line. With kind of an ink and wash style, it doesn't need to be perfect. You can even leave a little bit of white there. And then like up here, you can see some of it. So I'm gonna go ahead and color those in a little bit. Now I'm gonna go ahead and fill in the other two berries. Make sure you don't put your hand through the wet paint. This time I have a little bit of paint on my brush already and some water. Just a little bit of water. And this time I will leave a little white spot. And again, it's okay if you don't. And you just have to put it back in with like a white gel pen or a Posca pen or something. And then I'm going to go in with the darker color. Definitely put that kind of here, which is hard to see, I guess. Right, so since this berry is behind this berry, I'm going to make sure that that's a little darker because there would be a bit of a shadow there. And then I'm going to add a little bit more to this berry down here to darken that in too. And again, so you don't get a harsh line, take your brush, just rinsed out with maybe the touch of water, and go right along the edge, and it'll help diffuse it naturally. All right, we're gonna go ahead and go down to the bell, and then we'll go back up there. So for metallics, a lot of times I will go straight from the actual paint palette because you really have to get it nice and stirred up in order to get that really good metallic. So that's why I don't have it in my little tray. Okay, so I have my kind of goldy and my bronzy metallics stirred up. And I'm switching to my number 10 Princeton because this is a bigger area. I am not going to get it wet first when it comes to metallics. You just kind of want to go in straight up. I'm starting with the gold color first. And these are opaque, so you may lose your lines a little bit potentially. But I'm stirring it up really good. And then I'm just going to go straight in, filling that the whole thing in, because we'll go back in and add the black. And I hold my brush fairly perpendicular so that I don't go outside my line. I am going to go in with my tiny brush just to get those little spots that I can't really get with that bigger brush. Actually, while that's wet, I am going to go ahead with this little bit darker color and just add a little bit under the bow. Also, and you want to go with the shape, so you want to be adding it kind of curved. I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit kind of under this little center line because technically it does stick up. And then a little bit of a shadow on the bottom, and I'll kind of enrich those again. But this just kind of gets a little bit of a head start there. Okay, now we're gonna put in this last berry. Now because I'm not using a lot of wet on wet right here, I did not tape my paper down. A lot of times I will. It might buckle a little bit because I'm using more paint with the bell, but you can kind of, if it does buckle a little bit, you can spray the back with just a little bit of water and then blow dry it. And sometimes that'll actually help flatten it out. You can also just put it under a bunch of books. I'm still gonna go in with a little bit of that darker color rinse my brush, just make it a little bit, just barely damp, just to kind of soften that edge there. And then I can also go back in and add a little bit more of a shadow. And again, you don't even have to fuss as much as I am. It's so hard for me not to be fussy. A lot of times ink and wash is just kind of quick. I'm trying. That's why my videos take 9,000 years instead of like 20 minutes. I'll have to fast forward through some of this. Alrighty, and while I'm using the red, I'm going to go ahead and fill in the inner part of the bow. And this time I'm going to go straight in with that madder red because it's pretty dark. Once you start adding shadows and stuff, it really starts to kind of come to life. Go back in with a little bit of that scarlet color. Just a little bit. Just to add a little bit more kind of shading to the bow itself. Or the top of the bow, I should say. If you ever struggle with kind of achieving the shadows, or you think they're too harsh, you can also use colored pencils. I use those quite a bit to make shading with my watercolors, especially my faces. So the center of the orange isn't completely white. So I'm gonna actually break out my other set that I had. This is a mess of a palette, but this is, I believe, Naples yellow. So it's kind of like a flesh color, if you will. If you don't have access to that, you can always use a really watered down yellow ochre. You just want a whisper of a color. And I'm just going to go in and just kind of paint that in between the segments. And it is very, very light. It's just enough to kind of knock back that really bright white. All right, I'm gonna go back into the bell. See, it looks kind of rough, if you will. I wanna kind of clean that up a little bit. Like this one. I mean, the paper's crinkly, but it's not as much. So I'm going to go back in with that really creamy, just regular gold color and kind of go with the flow of the bell and put in a little bit more. And then I'm also going to go ahead and go back in with that bronzy color. I like to use the littler brush because I'm not putting it everywhere. I have to kind of put it at an angle to see my liner line, if you will. And then this got really thick, so I'm just kind of going in and removing a little bit of that. And then I am gonna also put a little bit of a shadow right above that center line because, like I said, it sticks out. I like to put the shadow in. You don't have to do that. You could have also, the reason I didn't do this, you could have also put like a branch up here and have it hanging from that, but because I wanted the rosemary, I decided not to do that. You could also, rosemary is associated with Yule, so that's why I chose rosemary. If you didn't want to use rosemary, you could just have it be like needle, like from a fir tree or an evergreen tree. Do that instead. Sky's the limit. So I think I'm just going to go ahead and dry this real quick off camera. That way I can put the shadow in and then the little hangy string, do another little outline, and then we'll be done. So I'll be right back. Okay, I went ahead and just colored that in black with just a black Posca pen. 0.7 millimeters. Now I'm going to go ahead and put this shadow in, and I'm going to be using Payne's Gray. one of my favorite colors ever. I'm going to be using two brushes. I'm going to be putting it close just on this left side, so like the light would be coming from the right side. With my smaller brush, I may move up to the 6, but for now I'm going to start with the 3, I think. Nope, I'm going to start with the 6. But then I'm going to bring in a little bit of a larger brush with just water on it to help it diffuse naturally. But I am going to have to turn my paper because you want the tip of your brush to be pointed towards whatever it is you want to kind of be getting up against. So because I want it to be right up against the ornament, I'm going to have to turn it like that. So I'm going to be using a fairly creamy consistency of the Payne's Gray to start with. And I'm going to start just like right, oops, I'm going to zoom in a little bit here, just right here. And that's a fairly creamy consistency. And I'm just going to go around a little bit of it, and then I'm going to quickly grab, oops, my brush with just water, and I'm going to go right along that edge and see how it just kind of diffuses naturally. It kind of pulls that paint away from it. You can dab it off if you need to, and then you can just keep kind of wiping off your brush to get off the water and the paint so that it just kind of goes out towards the edge of the paper naturally. And then if you want to add a little bit more, you can, and then you can kind of go over it one more time just to darken that in. And I switch brushes so I'm not wasting the paint that I already have on my paintbrush. I'm going to take a little bit more of a wash, or just like a little bit of a lighter, and just put a little bit in between some of these little leaves because they would also be kind of casting a shadow. And you can put a little bit also inside the orange just to make it look a little bit more 3D. You don't need a lot, just a little bit. And then I'm going to create the string with a gold Posca pen. This is 1mm. Remember, you always want to shake your Posca pens with the lid on. And I'm going to use this so that I can make it, you know, fairly straight. You can always do it with a pencil first. Just make sure it's wiped off. You can kind of gauge like where the bow is to kind of find where you might want your center or the center of the orange. You can also make it just a little bit off center, especially since this is hanging over, so there would be more weight maybe on that side. Again, I can overthink everything, so. Always test it first just to make sure it's good to go. There we go. Okay, so off camera, I went in with the thicker liner just to add a little bit of variation in the rosemary. I also went back around the outer part of the bell with the thicker one, and then just the outer part of the orange. And then I went back over my inside lines with this smaller one, as well as I went back around the berries. I added one little highlight with the white Posca pen right there. And then I did add, it's hard to see, there you go, a white line here, and then I just added a couple, and we're not doing a realistic bell, just to add some highlights into the bell. And then I was going to add just a little bit maybe into the bow, just to break it up a little bit too. I also added right here just the tiniest bit of gold, so it would be like the bow is threaded through the little top portion of the bell. And then I am gonna go ahead and just put a light kind of line through here so it all kind of matches. And now you have a couple choices. You could be done. You can put a gold border. Zoom back out. Gold border, which I did with this big old fat Mama Jamma Posca pen. And then I also added a little bit of gold splatter. I'm gonna do both of those again. So I will show you kind of one side how I did with the Posca pen. I did not overthink it. I just kind of started putting it on. Make sure your painting's dry before you put your hand in it. I always make sure that I don't have anything dirty. Because nothing sucks more than you get done and then you smear something. Been there, done that. So I'm gonna go just kind of like right along this line that I drew on the inside. And I'm just going to, you can push away from you or pull towards you, whichever way works. I kind of do both. Just depends. I'm not necessarily making it so that it has to be a solid gold line. Anybody old enough to know Solid Gold? That TV show that was on Saturdays? You'll have to let me know in the comments. Now, I could have put tape around the edge to make sure that I made it all straight and beautiful. There we go. And then I am going to do a little bit of splatter because I am obsessed, even though people are like, it's too much. I don't go with what other people say. If anybody knows me, they know that's how I roll. So I'm going to use the gold that I already used. And you want to have it a little extra water so it's looser, so you can actually get it to splatter. So when you go to splatter, you can either kind of loosely hold your brush and just see if it doesn't come off, then it's because you need more water. The size of brush also will dictate how big your droplets are. So holding it at the edge, and then you can do it that way. You can also hold it and grab another brush and tap if you want to do it that way. Some people literally just like do that. So I kind of use a variety depending on what I'm going for. And then also if you don't want your ornament to be splattered, then you can kind of cover it with a piece of paper. I don't mind if a little bit of it gets it. I just didn't want the whole thing to be splattered on the ornament. There we go. I think we're done. You can see the shimmer of the gold. Don't forget, you can tag me on Instagram. Let me know in the comments if you think it would be fun to start a Facebook page that's private just for people who watch my channel and who want to share their own artwork there as well and be able to talk to each other. I would love to do that. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It will help my channel grow and, you know, be able to connect with more like-minded people like us if you're into the art world. So, and then let me know what you think about this project, this painting, if you like this style. I'd love to hear from you, and I hope that you have a blessed Yule and a happy holiday. I will not be back more than likely until after Christmas, but maybe, because I do have another idea, so I may be back next week to be announced. So, all right, I will catch you next time. Thanks a lot for tuning in.